we left to go from we left to go from the coast, traveling through the Midwest. It was me, my wife Kimmy, our 7-year-old daughter Katie, and our 5-year-old son Alex. Everything went fine for the first few days. We took our time with the trip because we weren't really on a constraint in that regard. We stopped at pretty much every landmark every landmark every landmark one can see whilst making a cross-country trip. But there was one night in a state in the Midwest that I won't name, which led to a series of events that still hasn't ended. It was around 9 p.m. on Wednesday night, and we had collectively decided to stop at the next place we saw to eat. We saw a sign to an exit on the next ramp for a place called Daisy's Diner. We get there, and nothing seemed amiss. It was just about dark, and we decided that after we'd eaten, we would find a hotel for the night. Daisy's Diner was a classic small-town eatery, with road signs on the wall and a waitress that called everyone Hun. It was a very classic small-town USA feel to it. The food had a home-cooked taste to it. I could certainly imagine this place being at a capacity on any given day, however. At this time, we were there were only 4 other people in the restaurant. A man and a woman ate together at a booth, while 2 men separately sat at the counter. All 4 of the other patrons left before we did, and we were replaced with 2 more men who came in at separate times. It was the last man to come in to bring what had happened to our attention. He informed me that I was the one with the Honda truck outside, and it had been ransacked. I ran outside, and sure enough, the passenger side door was open, and everything had been rifled through. CDs were strewn about the seats, the paperwork from the glove box was on the passenger side floor, the backpacks my children had in the back seat with their belongings were opened and gone through. I was furious. I demanded to see the camera footage, only to find out the cameras were essentially for show. I asked to know who the people were that had left the restaurant before us. A solitary waitress only personally knew one of the men. Oh, fuck, hang on. Just put an ad in front of me. God damn it, now I gotta restart the fucking... Hang on. This is why I hate internet. Okay, anyway. Okay. The solitary waitress only personally knew one of the men, and vehemently vouched for him. Against my better judgment, I decided not to pressure him or the other still unidentified man, instead choosing to let the police handle the situation. I explained to the police that as far as I could tell, nothing had been stolen and no damage had been done to the car. The waitress gave me the name of one of the men she knew, and the police knew him as well. Not because he had run in with the law, but because he was a very active member of the local church, and was a man who had held high regard by the entirety of the community. As for the other man, all I had seen was his back. Unfortunately, nothing was done about the break-in besides the filing of a record to the incident report and casual keep an eye out from the police. I assumed the other man in the diner had seen our vehicle full of belongings out of our line of sight and seized the opportunity. Carpe diem, you piece of shit. Hang on. Fucking phone froze. Yay! Technical difficulties. Seriously, my phone just froze. The fuck?
That is great.
Hang on. Turn it on and back off. There we go. Okay. Shit. Okay. Towards a motel in the small town in which we had eaten. Since it was now close to midnight and my wife wanted to lie down and get some rest, we decided we were safe enough to stay there. Being that it was a motel and there'd be other people there, whatever logic I could scrape together is what I used to justify staying there because I was admittedly too tired to keep driving. However, when we got to the motel, it was close to something out of a horror movie as could be. The sign had missing letters and there was only 2 other cars in the dirty parking lot. That said, though the area was well lit and would provide adequate shelter for a few hours. The man who helped us to the counter had a strange vibe about him. But checking into the room with went without an incident. Actually, until the morning, I thought the whole night had gone on without a hitch. When we were settled in the room and ready to go to sleep, I double and triple checked the locks on both of the door to the outside and the door that connected to the next room. It wasn't an ideal situation, but such was the case with the only room with two queen beds was connected to the other room. The clerk informed us that the only other person staying there was a woman on the opposite end of the motel, and went as far as showing us that the room connected to ours was empty. We all slept okay, in fact for much longer than we had planned. I woke up in the morning and opened the blinds to check on the car, which I had parked directly outside the room. Nothing seemed out of place, at least on the outside. There was a small piece of paper that had been slid under the door to the outside, and assuming it was a checkout receipt, I ignored it and got ready for the day's drive. After a shower, I sat on the bed to watch TV while my wife inevitably took 4 times longer than me to get ready. Fucking women. Sorry about that. It was then that I decided to take a look at the checkout receipt. I picked up the once folded piece of paper and opened it. My heart sank when it turned out to be a drawing from my daughter's backpack. God damn it, it fucking showed me an ad again. It was good, it was just at the good part, too. It was getting all juicy and shit.
You're sliding around.
Fuck yeah. Okay. Where was I? Okay. Right. With a slight change. It was a picture of our family, but the thief had added a crudely drawn version of himself to it, and the words "nice to see you," being that the addition to the drawing was done in crayon, just like the original drawing had been. There was nothing about the man I could discern. All I knew was that whoever had broken in our car had followed us to the motel and slid this drawing under our door. Or at least that's what I thought. My son, that evening, questioning, observant young man that he is, was playing on the ground with some toy cars near the door. Asked me what the rubber piece lining on the bottom of the door to the outside was for. I explained that it was likely to keep things such as leaves and snow from blowing under the door and keeping either heat or cold air in. It was then that I realized that the rubber strip would have prevented a piece of paper from being slid under the door. The revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. Whoever had set this drawing on the floor had done so from the inside. I checked the locks on the connecting door and found one of them to be unlocked. In an effort to spare my wife and children the horror I was currently experiencing, I just rushed them out under the guise that we had slept late and I wanted to cover a lot of ground that day. I considered talking to the motel clerk, but by that time a younger girl was working at the counter and I wasn't going to stay here a second longer than I had to. We got back into the highway without interruption and continued our trip. My wife asked me what was wrong, but I shrugged it off as being still tired. We made the rest of our journey with nothing out of the ordinary happening, aside from the alarm incidents of the Disney Diner and the Galleria Motel at our road trip. It was actually pretty fun. Our activities provided to be a good distraction from the uneasy feeling I had in the pit of my stomach. I made sure to take a different route home so as not to pass through the small town with the incidents that happened. My family returned home. Oh, fucking ad! I don't want to win an Xbox. Fuck off. Jesus Christ. Hang on. It's a long-ass story, too, so I gotta keep scrolling way the fuck down.
It's daytime.
Okay. I made sure to take a different route home so as not to pass through the small town where the incident had happened. We finally returned home about 3 weeks later. All of our mail was piled up on the front porch, so I grabbed it as I walked into our house for the first time in nearly a month. Unpacking and getting situated took a little bit of time overlooking through the mail, but I eventually got to it and things began again. Towards the middle of the pile of mail, there was an envelope with no return address. I opened it and I found a single handwritten note and a folded up piece of paper. The girl is very good at pictures. I unfolded the paper and it was yet another drawing of my daughter's. This one was of a black and brown dog. I figured whoever was doing this had gotten our address from our vehicle's registration or some other kind of document after going through the car. I informed the police, who did a pretty shitty job of making me feel safe. I kept what I had happen for my wife, as I knew she would just worry, and I wanted to keep my family as stress-free as possible. I wondered how many pictures of my daughter I had in her backpack, but in reality I knew it was quite a few. I'll get to that later. Everything was fine for about a week, until one day we got back home from a day at the park. We got inside, and the kids ran over to the couch and turned on the TV. My wife walked into the kitchen, started making the kids something to eat. I went to the bathroom. When I got out, my wife was standing on the sliding door of the backyard. That's when I heard it. Barking. My thoughts raced, and I refused to believe it. It couldn't be. Sure enough, a black and brown German Shepherd about a year old was tied to a fence post in our backyard. By this time, our kids had heard the barking and came to check on what was going on. We all ventured outside, and I told them to stay back while I inspected the dog. The leash was tied to a post in a way that made it look like the dog had jumped over the fence and gotten caught or something. I don't know, it really didn't make sense. It just wasn't completely obvious that someone had put their dog there intentionally. Upon meeting me, the dog licked my hand and rolled on its back to have its stomach pet. Kids then rushed me and began showering the dog with love, which is wholeheartedly accepted. He seemed enthralled with the kids, who returned their affection in droves. My wife found a soft spot in her heart and pleaded with me to keep the dog. It went against my gut, as I knew that the dog was a result of, but in the ongoing efforts to shield my family, I reluctantly agreed to keep him. We named him Roscoe, a name my daughter picked in a weird way. God fucking damn it. Fucking ads, man. This shit sucks. I'm using the Creepypasta website, and it keeps giving me fucking ads, and I have to go back to the story, reopen it, and then re-scroll down to where I was at. It fucking sucks. And it's not like I can turn off the Wi-Fi, because then it won't fucking show up. Alright, hang on. We named it Roscoe, a name my daughter picked, in a weird way. I felt like I was giving whoever was doing this exactly what they wanted. I knew this hadn't been a coincidence. I just didn't know why it was happening. The dog incident didn't come off as a threatening gesture. None of it made sense. The dog quickly became a member of our family. He took a particular liking to Katie, which of course made me uncomfortable. While I was naturally pleasant to the dog and made sure he had a good life, there was a part of me that despised him. A part of me that hated what he represented, and that was the fact that there had been a strange man that had either personally or organized a dog based off one of my daughter's pieces of artwork being placed in the backyard. I felt like he knew we kept the dog, and that the dog was happy here. I felt like he had done this before, and that he had gotten off on it. But I had no way of knowing. I had already called the cops, and they essentially told me there was nothing to be done. The way I saw it, and I'm sure they would have agreed, is that I wasn't necessarily dealing with what one would call a stalker. I mean, sure, there were stalking qualities to what was going on, but since we'd been home and we hadn't been followed as far as I could tell, and hadn't received strange phone calls, the only correspondence was a letter that I had hidden from my wife. There wasn't exactly anything provocative I could do to protect myself and my family, so I figured I would just have to take everything as it came up. The end of the summer came, and we always had a tradition. We would spend a week at my late father's cabin. The thought of canceling this year certainly crossed my mind, but I chose not to, as nothing else had happened since we'd been gifted with Roscoe. So we packed up the car and made the 4-hour trip to the cabin, which was on the edge of a small town called Long Lake. Long Lake was a small town of cabins that people vacationed at. I don't think there were any permanent residents. That the people who worked at the general store and restaurant there commuted from the town about 20 miles away. But this late in the summer, people were scarce, if even there at all. When we arrived at our cabin, the neighbor we'd come to know over the years, an older man named Floyd who vacationed there with his grandkids, was packing up to leave for the year. Apparently, he'd spent about 3 weeks up there that year, much longer than usual. Oh, hang on, that fucking ad again. Ugh, Christ. Sorry, people watching at home. This is the internet.
To the no one that's watching.
Yes, to the no one that's watching. This is a good story so far. I like it. Bit creepy, bit weird.
But I like it.
But you like it?
But I like it.
Okay. Apparently, he had spent about 3 weeks up there that year, much longer than usual. It turns out his grandkids were feeling as if they were too old for the annual cabin trip. I felt kind of bad for Floyd. I knew how much he looked forward to the trip. After introducing Roscoe to our annual neighbor, we said our goodbyes to Floyd, who promised to return the following year, even if he did it alone. I had the wife and kids start unloading the car while I went and unlocked the cabin. Before I approached the door, I stood there, looked off into the distance over the lake, and breathed in a big helping of fresh country air. It felt like a weight off my shoulders, being here and not having to worry every day. Wondering if that would be Wondering if that would be the day I got another one of my family daughter's drawings in the mail. I felt truly at peace, even only for that moment. That pace would quickly fade, though, when I got to the door of the cabin and it was already unlocked. Now, chances are it was just left unlocked from the previous year. I really had no ground to suspect anything other than that. Even with everything going on, there was no way that the mystery man could have known where our cabin was, much less gotten there before us. I had kept a keen eye in the rear view on the trip to make sure we hadn't been followed, just to be safe, and I had no reason to believe we had. I opened the cabin door and the air was heavy and moist. There was a thick layer of dust on everything that the eye could see, amplified by the rays of sunlight coming through in the windows. Alright, I gotta move my character occasionally or else I'll get kicked.
Yeah.
Everything was exactly as it was a year prior. I breathed easy, taking solace in the fact that it was more than likely myself a year ago. Oh, god damn it. Another fucking ad. Jesus Christ.
Ads are the way.
Yeah, a year ago that had made me worry so much presently. I walked to the master bedroom and fumbled with my fuse box until the power came on. My family entered the cabin, my children wide-eyed with excitement. They ran to the other bedroom, which... Oh, hang on. I fucking lost where I was. Which contained bunk beds, and immediately who got the top bunk. My wife went back outside to get another round of bags and suitcases while I got the water going. Knowing I had to personally get the electricity. Fuck! I don't care about buying an Xbox 360 or winning it. Fuck off. Jesus Christ. Hang on.
Ads are the way, my brother.
Yes, they are. Knowing I had to personally get the electricity and water running gave me even more peace of mind. It meant that no one had been using the utilities in at least the past while, as evidenced by the dust. Things went well for the first day. We got settled, and I put off cutting the grass until the next day. We took a ride on the ATVs and played board games. The next day, I took my family to a spot across the lake that we'd taken the kids to every year. It had a small playground and an actual beach. There was a dock a little ways onto the water that my daughter was now big enough to play on with my wife. And my son enjoyed trying to catch fifth. He enjoyed trying to catch fifth. He enjoyed trying to catch fish with his hands at the shore. He grilled out and had a nice meal, and we grilled out, not him. We grilled out and had a nice meal and stayed there until almost sundown. My plan was to cut the grass when we returned home, but as we pulled into the small grassy area we used as a driveway, I noticed that the grass was freshly cut. My heart once again sank into my stomach. My wife commented that a neighbor must have done it as a favor and went on about her business. I looked around, and my other lawn that I could see was still uncut. I knew who had done this well. Sorry, hang on, I fucked up. I knew who had done this. Well, not exactly who, but I knew. I truly was confused at the motivations of this mysterious stalker. So far, he had given us a dog who had quickly become a member of the family, and next, he cuts the lawn of our cabin for us. A part of me almost considered just accepting what was going on, and it seemed harmless. And the guy only grew in me, and nothing bad happened the next day. But then, the fourth day came. It was about 7 a.m., and my wife took Roscoe outside so he can run around and use the bathroom. She tied his leash around a post and had been designed specifically for him, and went inside to start cooking breakfast. Roscoe was a quick learner, and in the short time we'd had him, we trained him to do a few things. One of these things was to bark when he was ready to come inside. My wife cooked breakfast, and I woke up the kids, and we had all sat down to eat. It wasn't until we were nearly finished that Katie asked where Roscoe was. Strange, I thought. He hadn't barked when he was ready to come in. I figured he was just having a good time enjoying the openness of the nature around him. I told Katie that Mommy had put him outside and that I would go get him. Nothing could have prepared me for what I saw when I walked out of the cabin. Roscoe was on the ground, and his throat had been brutally gouged open. So much so that he was nearly decapitated. Then, from the horizontal throat cut, was a vertical cut down to his testicles, and his innards had been removed from his body and placed next to him. His blood pooled into the grass around his small, lifeless body. I felt like I was going to throw up. I ran over to him and looked at his wounds. I could tell that it had been done with a blade of some sort, and it was not a random animal attack.
Jesus.
Hang on. Before I did anything else, I ran back into the cabin and told my family to stay inside and not look out the windows. I left before they could question me. As tears streamed down my face at the horror I was currently taking care of, I dug a hole for Roscoe. I gently placed him into the hole and... Fuck! That's such a good part! Stop giving me ads!
They need you to win an Xbox.
I'm actually interested in the story now. Okay. Hang on. Shit, where is it? What the fuck? Okay. I gently placed him in the hole and pet his soft back one last time. I truly had come to care about the dog, no matter where we had come from. I filled the hole with dirt and went to put the shovel back in the shed. I don't know how I had noticed it when I went to retrieve the shovel in the first place, but on the siding of the cabin was a message, written in what I assumed to be Roscoe's blood. It simply said, "Good doggy." I washed the message off before returning inside to my family. The entire time I had been dreading explaining to them what had happened. I sat my kids down and told them that while we were inside, another animal, probably much larger than Roscoe, had gotten into a fight with Roscoe and hurt him, to the point where he had to go to doggy heaven. My wife and children cried, and I joined them. None of us could believe that we had just lost the newest member of our family. With this, though, I told everyone to pack up, because it wasn't safe to stay in the area with such a large animal on the loose. They abided, and we went on the road within the hour. We stopped at a gas station just outside of Long Lake to get gas, pick up snacks, and use the restroom before all of us got set out for a 4-hour trip. We all went inside, and thankfully, I was the first to come out. I saw it from the gas station doors, an envelope under my windshield wiper. I sprinted to the car in hopes to get it before my wife saw it. I succeeded and immediately checked the area around for anyone. There was no one. No cars driving in either direction, and no one on foot anywhere as far as the eye could see. I even made a circle both ways around the gas station and did a check inside the gas station itself, and found no one that hadn't been there already. I wanted to ask the gas... Fuck! I hate this shit.
You gotta win an Xbox or buy one.
Seriously, I'm using the Creepypasta website, so why is it giving me ads like it's a fucking knockoff? Hang on. I'm really far into the story now. Okay. I wanted to ask the gas station clerk to see the security camera feed, but a curious look around the place didn't reveal any cameras. That, and I didn't want to alert my wife to the note I'd found. I waited for my son to get out of the bathroom and told everyone to wait by the door for me inside the bathroom. I opened the envelope and took out the folded piece of paper. This drawing was one of our house that Katie had done about a week prior to our road trip. I remember because I had hung it up on our refrigerator when she'd finished, only for her to take it down and put it in her portfolio. This one depicted our family in the swimming pool in our backyard. The addition to the scene was the same crudely drawn man standing behind the fence with a pile of wrapped presents next to him. There was a writing on the back of the picture this time too. We are a happy family. I didn't know what to think of this picture. My family and I had been swimming in our backyard countless times that summer. Even after the incident in the Midwest when my guard was 100% up, I was positive no one had been spying on us. My only rational guess was that the man had used the pool in place of the lake and lake we had swum in days prior, and the fence to be the tree line from when we could have spied on us. Whatever the case, I folded it up in my pocket and got my family the hell out of there. I took random back roads on our way to turn the summer ride home, much to the confusion of my wife. I told her I was checking something on the car. I was obviously seeing if anyone was following me, and again, I found no evidence of that. When we returned home, the first thing I did was cover up the pool for the remainder of what was left of the summer. Much to the dismay of our family, I made some bullshit about how the water levels had been affected in our absence. Something that didn't really make sense, but got the job I wanted done. I wanted to tell my wife what was going on. I really did, but at this point, I felt like I had already hidden so much that the focus would have been the issue at hand, rather on my evasiveness. So I resolved to continue the charade. I was the protector of this family, and I was going to do just that. This wasn't anything I couldn't handle on my own. I told myself, in retrospect, I could have used all the help I could get. Things were fine for a few months, with nothing eventually happening. With nothing eventful happening, I found myself going crazy at the notion of not being able to do anything about what had happened. I forced myself to accept that the pool in the picture was a stand-in for the lake, and that this person hadn't been watching us. I didn't know what to make of the presents, though. He'd already... Fuck! I don't want an Xbox. Alright, hang on. Sorry, no one watching.
Yeah, sorry about that, no one.
Has anybody even checked in?
Nope.
Wow. This is gonna be a long-ass video.
Been streaming for 28 minutes.
Yeah, damn. Okay. I didn't know what to make of the presents, though. He'd already done what he did to Roscoe. I thought maybe that was the present. But then he had already given the picture of the dog back to us when he gave us Rusco, so that wasn't it. The kids went back to school at this time. Something I was especially apprehensive about. I had to quell my worries, though, so as not to alert my wife as to why I didn't want to leave my kids, ever. Luckily, as I said, for the first few months of the summer, nothing happened. I was at the point where I felt more at peace than I had since the whole thing had started. Then, the Christmas season came. We had just put up our tree, hung the ornaments and all, and we had a nice family dinner that night. I remember it vividly. Everything was great, the kids were excited for Christmas, my wife and I were a little less excited for Christmas. Shopping at the Sort of Line can be referred to as Christmas time mall of our town. Our kids were doing great in school, my wife and I were excelling in our careers, and most importantly, we had no contact with the stalker. The only thing of any importance that happened during this period was that my wife was sort of called me out. She detected that something was wrong with my general attitude of worry all the time, but I played it off We talked for a while about all sorts of things, but we were happy. But we were happy at the end of the conversation. Oh fuck, I'm dying. And the rationale was that perhaps this was all over. Why bring it up now? God damn it! This is fucking ridiculous. This is a good story though.
It
This
is.
is good as shit. Fucking won't load. You enjoying yourself?
Yeah.
Hang on. Don't you fucking dare. There we go. My rationale was that perhaps this was all over. Why bring it up now? That night, we all went to sleep happy. Now I'm a heavy sleeper. That night, though, I woke up at about 3:30 in the morning. Normally, if I wake up thirsty, I'll just soldier through it and fall back asleep. For whatever reason, though, that night, I got up and went to the kitchen for water. As I went to walk back upstairs, something made me turn my head towards the tree. Moonlight coming in through the window illuminated the tree, and that's when I saw it. There was a present under the tree. I quietly but quickly made my way over to the tree and picked it up. It was a small box wrapped in green Christmas-style wrapping paper. There was a "to from" card with a bow tied through it. Through the "from" was just a smiley face. The "to" was to Katie. I remember standing there for a moment in utter shock. This man had just been inside our fucking home. Before I did anything else, I went through the rest of the house, top to bottom, making sure he wasn't still here. I went and checked on both the kids as well as my wife. When I felt satisfied after what felt like an hour of useless searching, I went back to the gift. I tore off the wrapping paper, ripped open the box. Inside were an envelope and a videotape. Yeah, a videotape. Like what they used before DVDs. I opened the envelope already, knowing what it was going to be. Another one of my daughter's drawings. I unfolded the paper, and I unfolded the. Hang on. Where is it? Okay, I unfolded the paper, and sure enough, there was one of my princess, and there was one of a princess my daughter had drawn. The princess was dressed in a pink ball gown with a tiara and a wand. The addition to the drawing was what I assumed was a pool of blood beneath her, and in the corner, a tiny drawing of the man himself holding what somewhat resembled a knife. This one really got to me. I didn't know if my daughter had drawn this picture imagining herself as a princess, or the man himself had seen it that way. I had no way of knowing. I got rid of the box and wrapping paper so my wife wouldn't find it, and put the drawing and videotape in with my work things. The next day I went to a pawn shop and picked up a VCR. I got it for $3. Can you believe that? Anyways, I went home while my wife and while my wife and kids were gone, and went to the basement, just in case they came home. I hooked up the VCR to the older television we had down there in our makeshift rec room, and inserted the tape. Before I pressed play, a million different things ran through my mind. I wasn't sure what I was about to be watching. All I knew is that I wasn't going to like it. I was expecting to see footage of my family shot from a hidden location. The firmest image was a dark room with a white sheet hanging over a wall running into the floor like a green screen. A person walks out from behind the camera, but not far enough to make out any kind of description. He's off to the very far left side of the view, only his right shoulder in frame. I hear a creaking of some sort, like something opening. Then I hear whimpering. A little girl whimpering. I hear a voice whisper, "Go." And then out walks a little girl of about 8 or 9, dressed as a princess. She was a spitting image of my daughter's drawing. Pink ball gown, tiara, and wand. She walked to the sheet and turned around, now facing the camera. Tears streamed down her face. The man went behind the camera and picked it up. His voice filled the hushed static and loomed over the basement. He quickly whispered, "Do it. Do what you're supposed to do." The girl started outright sobbing, and a hand flies into frame and smacks the little girl. It made me wince. She stopped crying and began to act. She cursed and introduced herself as Princess Penelope, and that was the title of my daughter's drawing. Between sniffles, she went on to say how she was so happy that she had been rescued by her prince, and now he had taken her to a huge castle to live happily ever after. She started sobbing again. The man's voice spoke again, this time more sternly through a still whisper. "Keep going." The girl sniffled herself back to the point that she could continue. My daddy was mean, though. He didn't want the prince to rescue me. My heart sank. I felt as if this was all an allegory to my daughter. This girl continued, "So now the prince is going to punish me because my daddy wasn't nice to him." The camera set back on the surface it was on when the video started. The man then storms at the little girl, and she screams, and he begins to stab her repeatedly. I couldn't watch, so I turned my head away. The sound was even worse. Her screams will never leave my mind. The man grunting as he thrust his knife into her will forever be burned into my ears. I looked back because I had to know who the man was. Every part of me had hoped he was foolish enough to show his face on tape, but I knew he wouldn't. And of course, no such luck. In fact, he was wearing a mask of some kind. When he had finished, he intentionally walked around the camera's line of sight, leaving only the poor girl's lifeless body in the frame before shutting the camera off. I vomited repeatedly until there was nothing left in my stomach. The situation thing I did was to go to the police station. I regarded them everything that happened up to this point, from the car break-in to the dog to this. Now that there was a murder that definitely appeared legitimate and not staged, they seemed to take more of an interest. I told them I was keeping this ever-developing situation from my family, which they severely frowned upon and advised against, but said they would respect my decision, which I was grateful for. I got home later that day, and my wife asked me where I had been all day. I told her I went to conduct an interview with a detective for a project I was working on. I'm a writer. She bought it. At night, she asked me what was bothering me. A few years of marriage under my belt, and this meant that she could read me like a book. I had to play it off. I told her I was frustrated with my current project and was having a hard time moving forward. Being the amazing wife she is, she gave me some encouraging words, which I had actually needed them, would have cured the problem instantly. This, of course, weighed on my conscience. It was the first time since everything began that I was actually tempted to tell my wife about it. As I've said, deep down, I wanted to. In some selfish sort of justification, I felt I was doing a good thing by keeping them in the dark. In retrospect, I would have obviously told my wife everything from the beginning. This was just a scary time for me. I wasn't exactly in my right mind, so give me a break. About a week later, the detective in charge of my case called me. He basically told me that they had nothing. No idea who the girl in the video was, as she didn't match any missing children profiles in the national database. There was nothing that stood out about the room in which the video was filmed in. The only reason they knew the video was filmed any time recently was because there was a pack of cigarettes in the corner of 2 frames of the video, which had a logo that was new to the brand. I asked for a police officer to be stationed down the street from my house and at my children's school in unmarked cars, and they obliged. After this, nothing happened until March. While the police hadn't closed the case, it was at the top of their priority list, and any longer at the lack of leads made it come to a head. We no longer had police watching our house or the school. The calls from the detective got until I didn't hear from him at all anymore. I knew this wouldn't last, though. Every day I felt like I was going to get another letter, or rather, he was going to try to get another letter to my daughter. I had just been lucky enough to interrupt him at that point, but my luck had eventually ran out. It was March, the month of my daughter's 8th birthday. As the days got closer, my anxiety rose. I felt like this would be prime time for this sick fuck to do something again. We got all the presents Katie wanted for her birthday and arranged to have a party at our house for the day, since it fell on a Saturday that year. We had a whole setup in the backyard. It was an arts and crafts themed party, which I was reluctant to do for obvious reasons. But my daughter was the definition of an artist, inspired, motivated, and I was proud of her. I just knew that some of her work had gone, what some of her work had gone to, and how it was being used, and it broke my heart. The party went well. All of her friends showed up. Everyone was having a good time. I'm not playing anything. I'm talking with my friend. Fuck off. We all ate, and then she had begged enough to open presents, and we finally let her. We had them all set up on the table in the backyard, and we got deeper into the presents. The happier she got. Then, we got to a present that had no to from card on it. I locked eyes on the present. It was a box wrapped in the same wrapping paper as the box that it contained a few months prior. I had one. I couldn't jump up and rip the present. He had one. I couldn't jump up and rip the present out of my daughter's hands without alerting my wife or something. I also couldn't let her open it. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have enough time to think. I didn't even expected this. She opened the box and pulled out a piece of folded paper. I dropped my head. What was it going to be this time? Then she said it. It's one of my pictures that were stolen, she said with a joyful tone in her voice. She clearly didn't understand what that meant. My wife looked at me. I just shook my head. My wife stood up and took the picture from her, followed by the box. Katie questioned it, but Kimmy directed her to open another present, which she happily did. We walked inside while the other parents took over supervision. I took the box from my wife and demanded she give me the picture. Did she refuse? She asked me what's going on. And I told her everything. I told her about the motel, where Roscoe came from, what really happened to Roscoe, the videotape, the police reports. I told her about it all. By the end, she was in tears. And I didn't blame her one bit. She was furious at me for keeping it from her, and she was right to be. But I felt like I was doing the right thing. At least we had kept our daughter from seeing whatever was inside the box, and that acted as a silver lining for my wife. After I told her everything, my wife opened the picture. There was a painting. You have to understand that when I say my daughter's an art fan, it's because one medium just won't do. She draws, paints, uses crayon, markers, oil, paints, chalk, anything that can create an image she utilizes. And she makes pictures of absolutely anything, people, places, things, you name it. She made a picture of it. She always said that when she grows up, she wants to be an artist, and that she wants to draw the world. It's actually really inspiring. She kept every piece of her work in what she called her portfolio. Fuck off, man.
Yep, he's being muted.
Okay. Actually really inspiring. She kept every piece of her work in what she called her portfolio. When this madman took it from her backpack that night at Daisy's Diner, he took a piece of her. The picture was of our son, Alex. The addition was apparent. Dude, what is your fucking problem? The picture... Sorry, no one that's watching. It's my brother. He keeps fucking joining. This picture was of our son, Alex. The addition was apparent. A set of brushes was painted with a crude depiction of the man inside them to the side of our son. On top of the picture was a message scribbled in red pen. Me and your brother are friends now. Will we be friends? This sent chills down my spine. All sorts of scenarios went through my head. Had this man talked to my son? My wife ran outside to get him, and I looked in the box. It was a set of sketching pencils. On it was a formal note. Never stop drawing. My wife and son returned to the kitchen, where I was in a cold sweat. We asked him over and over if he had spoken to or seen any men or women we didn't know recently, and he denied it. We told him he wasn't in trouble, and he insisted he hadn't encountered anyone he didn't know. We asked him if maybe it happened at school during recess, and he insisted nothing like that had happened. I believed him, and he was a smart boy. My wife wasn't so sure. She politely ended the party as soon as the presents were finished being opened, and one by one the children were picked up by their parents, while the parents who were presently asked if everything was okay, we said everything was fine, just we had a family emergency. Police asked my son the same questions we asked, and got the same answers. The detective came to the same conclusion I did, that this particular incident was meant to scare us, but had not actually happened. Because of the long periods of time between happenings, police advised us to begin questioning friends, to make sure we weren't victims of an elaborate prank. This would have made me laugh if it hadn't made me nearly blind with rage. The man who was doing this was a killer. I had seen it with my own two eyes. I knew this wasn't a joke. Things again calmed down for about a month. Every day my wife was checking the mail. I don't know if she was hoping for a new letter from the stalker to be there, or if she was relieved every day that there wasn't. It began to take a toll on our marriage. Kimmy abhorred the fact that I had kept something so serious from her. She began to resent me for it. She never did get over it, and again, I don't blame her one bit. Towards the middle of April, the kids and I returned home after I had picked them up from school, and Katie went upstairs to put her things away and started on her homework. She came back downstairs after about 2 minutes and found me in the living room. Her words fell so heavily in my ears that it physically hurt. "Daddy, someone left a letter for me." I swallowed the lump that had insanely formed in my throat and stood up so fast in the chair I was sitting in slid backwards across the wooden floor. I ran across the room and grabbed the letter out of Katie's hands. "Dear Katie, I would like so much to be your friend. I don't have a lot of friends, but your pictures make me so happy and they are so good. You're a very, very good artist, and to be a friend with someone so talented would be so fun. I don't think your mommy and daddy would want us to be friends, though, so maybe it could be a fun secret. I want you to draw me lots and lots and lots of pictures so I can look at them all the time. I hope we can be friends." The letter was left unsigned. I was hit with a flurry of emotions. Sadness that my daughter had now directly been involved with this. Rage that this man continued to haunt my family unscathed by any attempts to find out who he was. And perhaps most prevalent of all, fear that I was virtually defenseless against this unseen threat. I called my wife, who immediately came home from work. We told the police about the letter, and they took it for evidence and tested it for fingerprints, which of course garnered no results. My wife and I had a long talk. We weighed our options. It came down to keeping the kids in the house and/or with one of us at all times, including taking them out to school and all extracurricular activities, or moving away. We chose the latter. We put our house up on the market, and we moved out within a week and a half. After staying in an apartment in a different city until May, we then moved to a single-story ranch in the southern Colorado. We got the kids enrolled in school, and my wife transferred hospitals. All in all, the move wasn't too difficult of a process. And for about 5 months, it seemed like it had worked. There was no sign of the stalker. Our summer went by without a hitch. We took a successful road trip to Florida, which the kids loved. My wife and I repaired the strain in our marriage, and things seemed to be looking up for a family. This is until we returned home one afternoon in late September. My wife got the mail, and we had a letter from an attorney. Its contents were the details of going over my mother's will. My heart sank like it hadn't in quite some time. My mother wasn't dead. And my mother wasn't dead. I immediately got my phone on and called her. I went directly to voicemail. I was panicked. I didn't know what to do. I called my aunt and again received no answer. My whole world was crumbling around me. I finally thought to call the retirement community my mother lived at. And when I went to contact her room, I breathed a sigh of relief when I was told, "One moment, please." The line rang and rang until finally the phone on the other picked it up. It was my mother. "Hello?" She asked, her voice sounding as sweet as ever. Hang on. Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. "Hello?" she asked, her voice sounding as sweet as ever. "Oh my God, Mom, are you okay?" "Well, yes, sweetie, I'm fine. Why do you think to ask? I just gotta..." And that's when it occurred to me. He had done this. He had found out where we lived, and he was fucking doing this. I stuttered for a moment before I told my mom I loved her, and then I would talk to her soon. My wife asked me what I was thinking, and I told her that I thought it was a sick joke. She agreed. When my wife sorted through the rest of the mail, there was another envelope, this one addressed to Katie. It was a picture she had drawn of Grandma. The addition to the picture were 2 dark X's over the main subject's eyes. The image will forever be imprinted in my brain. It made me physically ill at the time. I cried. I felt I had no way of protecting my mother, not without leaving my own family vulnerable. I called the detective that had been in the case back in California and told him the news. He agreed to put an undercover officer at my mother's retirement community for the next 2 weeks, something that gave me at least a little peace of mind. Thankfully, nothing happened to my mother. His sick jokes were just that, jokes. I was at my wit's end with this whole situation. I felt as if it would never stop. The next period of silence would be the longest one, 7 months of no contact from the stalker. Then something happened that jump-started my desire to get to the bottom of the whole thing. I received a box addressed to me with a frowny face as a sender. I opened it and found a small child's hand. It was badly decomposed, but the fingernails had been recently painted. The fingertips were burnt down to the point that any type of identification would be impossible. Along with the hand was a Polaroid of a smiling little girl. It was the girl from the video I had received so long ago. If the police couldn't, I was going to try and find out who he was. I was determined to get some answers from this sick fuck. After making a copy of the picture, I took the contents of the package I'd received to the police, just as I had figured the fingertips were much too damaged for any kind of identification. The detected the box itself for DNA, but it was, of course, wiped clean before being sent to me. The only fingerprints on it were from the male personnel, who all checked out. They said they would keep the investigation open, but that was the same thing they'd said not so long before then. I definitely decided I was going to check it out myself. I told my wife that I had to go out of state to do some research for my current project. I'm pretty sure she knew I was lying, but she let me go without too much of a fight. Not wanting to leave my family without their primary protector, we set up an elaborate plan to transport each of our kids to different places. Our daughter went to my sister's house in Wisconsin, and our son went to my wife's parents back in California. I say elaborate because we had other people help out with the decoy cars in the representative states for each trip to make certain they weren't followed. Once I felt that my kids were safe, I made sure my wife was comfortable staying home alone, which she assured me she was. I made sure she had ready to immediate access to the gun we had kept in the house, just in case, and I set off for the Midwest. After just about 15 hours of driving, I arrived at a small town that was the home of Daisy's Diner, which I decided would be my first stop. I pulled into the lot that I hadn't been in since the car was first broken into. It was dirtier than I remembered. The lot was littered with assorted garbage this time. I parked directly in front of the large windows of the building so I couldn't see the car from the inside. I walked into the restaurant, and the first thing I saw was the same waitress that served my family and I during the first visit. Only this time I took note of her name, Roberta. There was a few other people in the restaurant, 2 men eating together at a booth, a man and a woman eating together in another booth, and 3 men eating separately at the counter. I didn't recognize any of them, but her demeanor, I determined that Roberta didn't remember me from the previous meeting. I sat down and she asked what I wanted to drink. I told her I wasn't there for a meal. I took out the copy I'd made of the picture and a little girl and asked Roberta if by some miracle she had any idea who the girl in the picture was. She looked at it for what seemed like a long time, but ended up telling me she didn't recognize her. As she handed me the photo back, one of the patrons said loudly, "What the hell is going on out there?" I looked at him and saw he was directly his attention outside. I spun around and there was a hooded man standing in the driver's side door of my car. I immediately got up and ran outside as soon as I could to the door, making off running. I gave chase around the corner of the Daisies, and that's where I blacked out. The last thing I remember seeing was a mask under a hood, and something solid hitting me across the side of the head, knocking me unconscious. When I woke up, I was in the dark. I wasn't bound or gagged in any way, but I couldn't discern my surroundings. I found myself able to stand up straight, and when I did, about 25 televisions all turned on at once. They were all showing static with a volume on full blast. I yelled hello at the top of my lungs, but the sound of my voice was drowned out by the static. Then, so suddenly that it made me jump, each of the screens charged to a picture. The murder of the little girl. The same white sheet was hanging up draping on the floor, though this time, blood stained the bottom portion of the sheet. I assumed it was the little girl's blood, but I had no way to know if that was the only victim. Somehow I doubted it. A man came into the frame, but kept his back to me for entirely of the video. He spoke to me in a high-pitched yet gravelly voice. The best way I can describe his tone was that it was childlike. He spoke like an excited kid. "Hi, Katie's daddy. I'm glad you got my present. I don't want to do no harm to your daughter to great..."
What happened?
It said the internet connection was lost. So, anyway, this is a really good part, so I don't give a fuck. "Hi, Katie's daddy. I'm glad you got my present. I don't want to do no harm to your daughter, the great artist. I just want her to be my friend and draw me pictures. I sent back the ones that weren't my favorite, but I've kept the ones that are my favorites, and those are mine now. All I want is a friendship with Katie. Katie. She's such a very good artist. Now, more angrily, but you won't let her be friends with me. You're making me get you out of the way, and I don't want to do that because friends don't hurt friends. Daddies. I want to be a good friend and not a bad friend, so I'm going to make this simple. Simple. Easy peasy. If you promise to let your daughter, the artist, be my friend, I'll leave you alone. But if you still won't be nice, I'm going to get really angry. Do you promise to be nice? I muttered out, yes, unsure as to if this was a video or a live feed, or if I was being watched or not. There were moments of silence, and then he spoke again. This time calmed down. Good. But since you are such a meanie pants, I'm not going to tell you how to get out. Then he let out this sickling, childlike laughter. Then the video simply cut off. Now, once again in complete darkness, I felt the walls around me for some kind of door. I noticed that behind the television, the space went farther back that I could see. I tried my best to move the TVs, but there were some old 50-60 sets that couldn't be easily moved. I then thought to feel around the ceiling. It was just above my head, and at one point I was able to push up and sunlight seeped in through the cracks, locked by something but a flimsy latch. I quickly got out and found myself in the middle of a large forest. There was a bag next to the hatch door that held all my belongings in it. I took out my phone, which had a weakest signal as possible, and used its built-in compass after unsuccessfully trying to place a 911 call. After walking west, not sure why I picked the direction to head in, for about an hour and a half, I came to a road. Then, after going north for another 45 or so minutes, a truck pulled up and asked me where I was heading. I told him Daisy's Diner. At that point, we were only about a half hour from the restaurant. I guess I'd walked in the right direction after all. I was quiet and didn't ask me any questions, much to my appreciation. He dropped me off at Daisy's and nodded his head as a goodbye, shaking his head at my offer of gas money for help. Then sped off. I got in my car and looked in the mirror. I had a cut on my forehead that had been stitched up and cared for, but it still hurt like a son of a bitch. I'm gonna take a pause real quick. What do you think so far?
It's a really good story.
Yeah?
It seems like it's really planned out.
Yeah.
It's like
dude, this seems like a movie.
Yeah, it seems like he's had the idea for a long time.
Yeah, whoever wrote this is fucking amazing. But this feels like it could be a book and a movie. Like, not just a creepypasta. That's how good this shit is. Like, I could totally see this being a movie. But, anyway, you know, I realized that I had finally had a signal on my phone, so I called the police. They came to me, and I took them back to the place I was held. The first thing they told me was that there wasn't anything in any direction for miles. No business, no houses, cabins, nothing. They searched the hatch I'd been in, but found all the televisions to be smashed and the cords cut. They searched behind the TVs, where I'd suspected there was a tunnel, but just around a small bend it stopped. It's like it was the beginning of a tunnel that had never got finished. They again took a report and examined my injury, saying it had been properly stitched and treated. In the end, I was dropped off at my car at Daisy's and told I would be called with any further information, as it would be investigating the area around where I was held. By now, it was starting to get dark, and my head was absolutely killing me, to the point that I didn't feel comfortable driving for too long. So I headed to the only place I knew was close enough for me to get some rest and the possibility of an answer. I headed back to the motel where I was given the first picture. When I pulled in, I looked through the window of the front office and saw the man from those years before. I can't say for sure, but it almost seemed like when he saw me, he picked up the phone, said a few words, and hung up. At the time I thought it was just being paranoid because when I walked in, he didn't give off any signs of remembrance. I seemed genuinely curious when I brought up that what had happened during my first foray as a place of business. After a short back and forth, I got a room for the night. We went inside and passed out before I could even take any safety measures. Luckily, I woke up and found that nothing had happened, at least until I went outside. I exited the room and saw that all 4 of my tires had been gouged open. All I could do was chuckle. This seemed like such a pathetic action compared to the psychological torture my family and I had endured at the hands before this. I called a local mechanic and he was there within an hour changing all my tires. Then I was back on the road, again taking all the twists and turns I could to make sure I wasn't being followed. I returned home about 20 hours of driving and got my family all back together. They all remained unharmed during my absence. Things went fine for quite a long time, over a year by my count. Then, one night, I woke up to a knocking on our front door. I got the gun from the safe and approached the door, which was repeating knock knock, knock knock. I disabled the alarm system, swung open the door, and saw that there was a folded up piece of paper on the doormat under a small rock. I stepped over the picture and ran into the front lawn to see who it was. They couldn't have gotten far between the last knock and being at the door. I looked down the street in directions and saw no one. I'll admit, I wasn't quite thinking clearly. Even with the adrenaline, I was still half asleep, and I turned around and walked back to my door. I picked up the piece of paper off the ground and walked in. After closing and locking the door and resetting the alarm, I opened the paper to see which picture it was this time. This particular picture was a self-portrait Katie had done, a full-body drawing of herself. The addition to this one was another thinly drawn version of the stalker who was present, holding my daughter's hand. Katie had written above the photo the word me, but now there was a bold X through it, and written next to it, us. Thinking it was just another attempt to scare us, I set the picture in a drawer and resolved to call the police. But first I went to check on Katie. I went up to her room and pushed open her mostly closed door, and I felt the color drain my face, and that ever-family feeling in my heart sinking to my stomach. But this time it was worse. This time I felt like it never stopped dropping. Katie wasn't in her bed, and her window was wide open. A breeze blowing in, making her drapes wave. My daughter had been kidnapped. Holy fucking shit, this is good as fuck. This is good as fuck. Part 6, man.
Damn.
Wait, this might be true. This might actually be true, because this is the next line. On May 18th, 2015, Caitlin Lauren Boddick was kidnapped from our home in Colorado. That's oddly specific. Like, I'm pretty sure a few things are, like, exaggerated or dramatized, but I don't know if you've noticed, but a lot of things that have happened could happen in real life.
Yeah. Pretty much everything can.
And it makes sense that a writer could write something like this.
Yeah.
He did say he was a writer. Even in the absence of activity from our stalker, we had never let our guard down. Although my wife and I agreed that we had a gut feeling everything was a thing of the past. We thought we were free and clear. Obviously, we couldn't have been more wrong. I, my wife, the police, and the security company we had installed our alarm system agreed that the man or men waited until I disabled the alarm and then went in through the window and got Katie, knowing that made me feel as though it was my fault. I was absolutely devastated. Strong efforts to find Katie were made over the following 2 months.
I remember that case.
Searching parties, news segments, and canvassing detectives even went to the Midwest and questioned employees and patrons at Daisy's Diner about the first incident that seemed so long ago. But nothing turned up any leads. My wife blamed me. She became very distant, refusing to sleep in the same bed with me, and only talking to me if it was absolutely necessary. Our son clung to her as I wasn't in a proper place at the time. I hate to say it, but at that time, I was too broken up to care. The only thing I gave any peace of mind to was finding my daughter. After a while, the efforts died down. We had exhausted the resources that at once disposed of me in the event of an abducted child. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I basically put my life on the back burner. I drowned my sorrows in whiskey, and as cliche as that is. By the time the next letter came, I was on the edge of being nothing but a shell of and I once was. After 4 months, about 4 months after Katie went missing, I received a letter, this time addressed to Daddy. As soon as I saw it, I broke down in tears. In my mind, just having that envelope in my hands was a response to the question that had plagued me since the day she'd vanished. Was my daughter still alive? I tore open the envelope, and inside, as I had assumed would be, was a picture. On the folded piece of paper was a chilling message. I'm home now. This one was one I had never seen. It was a landscape. There were a lot of trees, what looked like a big field, and in the middle was another, though smaller, drawing of my daughter. The stalker had once again embedded himself in, again holding her hand, and this time he put a heart around the two of them. Pure, unguarded rage coursed through my veins, and I gripped the picture, crumbling it with my fist. The next part, though, I wasn't sure about. There was a half-done visage of a barn in the corner at the page, with an X on top of it, and a lazily done sky. Though it was like her other work, I couldn't tell my daughter had drawn it. Seeing it on the same page as the man's edition let me know that styles were too different, so I would come out of the same hand. Then it hit me. My daughter was trying to let me know where she was. At least that's what I made out of it. I looked at the envelope and found a handwritten letter from the kidnapper. Hello, new daddy. I hope you know that I am not a bad, mean man. I just really like the pictures and want all of them to look at all the time. I just really wanted her to be my friend, and now she can live with me and make pictures all the time. I promise I will not hurt her because I do not hurt my friends. If it did that, I would not be a very good friend myself. We would like you to visit, if you can find us. I don't want to tell you right away because then you will come right away, and I didn't want you to take her away before you had a chance to calm down. What I am saying, sir, is that she now lives here, but if you can find us, you can visit. But you have to come alone. If you bring anything else, I will skin her like a deer before you even get close. Jesus fucking Christ.
Jesus.
This is actually chilling, man. Like, I got goosebumps. Fuck. Once again, unsigned. I'm sorry I'm doing such a poor job of reading it because of my fucking coughing. Fuck.
Well, we're both sick, so perfect time to be streaming.
I'd recommend loading up.
Yeah, I know, right? Hello, no one watching. Really though, if someone were understand how good of a fucking story this is right now.
Hello, no one.
Hello, no one.
What do you think of this story, no one?
Yeah. Isn't
no
it
one
great?
says that it's great.
Yeah. Once again, unsigned, before I had a chance to weigh my options, I had made my decision. The police hadn't done a goddamn thing to help me so far. Despite the man's clear lack of education, I wasn't going to take his threats with a grain of salt. I had to do this alone, for the safety of my daughter. I retrieved the gun we kept in the house from the safe, and went to a store to buy more ammunition and extra magazines. Damn! As I packed a bag after returning from the store, my wife, in a rare show of concern, asked me what I was doing. I elected not to tell her what was going on. The only good it would do is bring up a barrage of questions that I was in no mood to address. She's not a stupid woman either. I'm sure she put the pieces together shortly, or if not immediately. I gave my son a kiss on the forehead goodbye and set out on the road towards the place it all began, Daisy Steiner. I pulled into the nearly vacant lot of Daisy Steiner. I again saw the same waitress that had been there the other two times. I walked in and the woman gave me an odd look, like she recognized me but couldn't place it. I don't blame her. It would have been quite some time since I'd been there. She asked what I wanted, and I ordered a Pepsi and 2 scrambled eggs. When she brought my drink, I told her I needed to talk to her about something that happened a few years prior. She was reluctant to talk, but agreed nonetheless. I reminisced with her about the night our car had been burglarized, which to my surprise she actually recalled. I practically begged her to rack her brain and identify the man who had gone unidentified in the night and in the incident. Told me she could barely remember back that far, but she hardly remembered the incident in general, much less the detail. I asked them what I now realize was a rather vague question at the time. I inquired about any barns in the area. Much to my dismay, there was a farming community. The small town Daisy's Diner sat in, surrounded by endless acres of farmland. I took a shot in the dark, hoping that the I and woman's familiarity with her assumed hometown could provide some insight and asked about a barn in the area that might have an X on the roof. She gave me a look and then told me she knew something, but ended up denying any knowledge of such a place. I knew she was lying, so I started on a wild goose chase of farmland. I drove around non-stop for hours, down every dirt road, every side street, every driveway. It was dusk when I finally came across something that I thought might lead me to the right place. I came to a gate with a sign on the red, Biloxi Farms, with the X much larger than the rest of the letters. And there was no way to drive my car in. I parked in a small opening in the wooded area next to the gate, and it closed off to the dirt and led to the God knows where, and ventured off on foot, gun in hand. For reference, this ended up being about a 20-minute drive in the opposite direction of Daisy's, as the area was put in a hatch. I must have driven past it twice in the dark, not seeing it until daylight started sweeping over the lonely lands. I walked down the dirt road until I saw 3 buildings in the distance right away. There it was far. I could barely make it out, a structure with a large, probably wooden X on the roof. I knew it was the right place. There could have been 100 farms with 100 X's on the roofs, but somehow I knew this was the right place. Call it father's intuition. I was about a half mile from the area when the structure with the X was as I get closer. I saw 2 other structures. The closer I got, obviously, I better could see what I was walking up to. I circled around the land, hoping to enter the immediate area with a point I couldn't be instantly spotted at. I was going to come in from behind. When I got close enough to see clearly, I saw a farmhouse, a barn, with a structure that has a large X, and what it looked like a detached garage. I thought about Katie's picture, given she had drawn the picture of the barn. Chances she'd be held in one of the other 2 structures, so I resolved to check those first. I made sure to keep a long distance between myself and the area the structures were in, keeping about 150 yards of perimeter. I walked through the tall grass on the side and ran through a small opening and went into a cornfield, which led me to the rear of the structures. I scoped it out a while and saw no movement of any kind in any of the 3 buildings. What I did see, however, was an old, beat-up pickup truck parked next to the garage. Hang on. My throat has like this back feeling in it.
Yep.
Oh, sorry. I'm not like, I'm burping on purpose to try and like get it out, but it's like old beat up truck parked next to the garage. I flipped off my gun safety and ventured inward. I made sure to be as quiet as possible as I traveled through the next to impossible to get through off the path cornfield. What should have been a few minutes walk took about 20 minutes before I came to the clearing. I was about 15 feet from the back door to the house, which was wide open. I sat there for a few minutes, trying to get some sort of idea where somebody was. I'm glad I did, because just then I saw the man that had kidnapped my daughter. All those years earlier, while we were eating our meal at Daisy's Diner, a man came in and told us that if we were the ones with the on the outside, and that had been broken into. The man who told us that the man who did it racking my brain. I vaguely recalled the man having a bag with him. If I was a better man, I'd say that my daughter's portfolio was in that bag when I thanked him for letting us know what had happened. I felt sick. He was one of the only people I hadn't considered as a suspect, given all the commotion. I hadn't even registered the man's odd voice in my brain, thinking back. If I had paid more attention to his voice, if I had known it was him right away. My eyes filled with tears when I got my bearings and got back on track. The man walked out of the back door and over to the attached garage. When he entered, I made a break for it. I sprinted across the backyard and leapt up 2 stairs directly into the house. I still had no idea if anyone else was there, but I didn't care. I was blind with determination. Thinking quickly, I ran to the door that I hoped would lead to a basement. It was my idea that the area the video was filmed in was the basement. I closed the door behind me and headed down the dark stairway, creaking loudly and with every step I took. I made it to the basement floor and used the flashlight on my phone as guidance. There were dead animals lined up on the ground in some sort of pattern. I didn't care to figure it out. Then I shined the light on the walls. Every foot or so, save for a few empty spots, were pictures of my daughter had drawn hanging on the walls. It made me sick, but if there was any doubt I was in the right place before, there definitely wasn't now. I stepped my way around the dead rabbits, cats, dogs, and small animals like gerbils and hamsters into another area. It smelled like an absolute death house. There must have been 100 dead animals down there. Sure enough, It was where the video had been filmed. The sheet hung from the ceiling, draping the floor, bloodstains still splattered all on the bottom of it. Then I knew I was absolutely in the right place. I decided to stop sightseeing and scour every inch of the hellhole until I found Katie. Then I heard the screen door open upstairs. I stood in silent wait as I heard the floor creak above me, doing my best not to gag on the putrid smell that engulfed me. The walking upstairs stopped for a moment, then picked back up as whoever was walked back to the back of the door and exited the house once again. I checked the rest of the basement, but she obviously wasn't there. I quickly made my way back upstairs and back to the kitchen. I walked through a threshold in the living room, which was something sort of being a product of hoarding. There was a garbage covering the entire floor. What could once have been used as a couch was now home to a maggot-filled takeout containers and empty beers and soda cans. To my left was a stairway leading to the second floor, where I saw something highly disturbing. There were pictures lining the stairwell, and in these pictures was a familiar bunch. The waitress at Danny's Diner holding hands with the man who had ran the motel. Next to them was the man who had my daughter. And next to him were two of the cops who had helped me when I had my troubles in this town. Finally, there was a picture of the man who had given me the ride to Danny's Diner as I was abducted. It felt like everyone knew. Everyone in this town knew what was going on, and they were in on it. When I was done this, I was going to contact the FBI and blow the lid off this fucked up place. I found my mind wandering, but I got back focused and went upstairs. All I found up there were more garbage lining the floors in the hallway. There were two rooms on the left side, and one on the right at the end of the hall. At the top of the stairs was a bathroom which revealed the deepest depths of the sewer. Shit and piss covered the floor around the toilet. Wet towels and clothing covered the rest. I walked down the hall and peeked into the first room on the left. It was literally nothing but garbage. The second room contained a solitary mattress. It was old, soiled, and stained with only God knows what. The room on the right held nothing of an importance either, except when I looked in it, I heard the door close once again. I stepped in the room and hid behind the door. I heard footsteps coming up the steps on the window, so I did. As quickly as I could, I got outside and shut the window behind me. I stayed up there for a few minutes and then saw the man go back into the garage. I had a feeling that that's where my daughter was. I crawled around the roof and climbed down some lattice to the ground. I sprinted over to the garage and took a peek inside a back window. It was set up like an art studio. The man was sitting at a desk drawing. As I watched him, he stopped. Without breaking his gaze, as he had on the paper on the table beneath him, he reached down to his left and pulled up a mask, placing it over his head. It was a plastic mask that had drawn designs on it. Suddenly, he turned his head and looked directly at me. All I heard was a loud, shrill, childlike voice saying, "Daddy." And the man stood up and sprinted out the front door of the garage. I ran around and found him running to the barn. I ran as fast as I could after him and fired 2 rounds, missing both. He ran into the barn and I quickly followed him. The only light in the barn was from the sunlight coming in through holes in the ceiling. It was a generally wide open area. There was one vestibule in the far corner and a stairway that led to the railing, less locked area, and a plywood board sticking up in random places. The floor was covered in a thin layer of hay and oil spots. Towards the back were some hay bales. The man's immature voice filled the open air of the barn. "You see that, Katie? He's finally come and visited us. I bet he wants to see your new pictures that you drawn here." "Where is she?" I screamed. "She's close," he said before giggling uncontrollably. I suspected the man to be up in the rafters, so I sprinted across the open floor to the barn, tore the block off at the area of the far corner. At the last possible moment in my peripheral vision, I saw him. He tackled me from the left side. He must have been hiding behind one of the hay bales. What happened next wasn't a long, drawn-out fight. I didn't lose my gun in the ensuing brawl, so if that's what you were hoping for, I'm sorry. Real life isn't like the movies. He tackled me to the ground. I wrestled with him for about a second and a half. Then, when he got on top of me, I pressed the barrel of the gun into his throat and pulled the trigger, blowing a hole in the back of his neck. That sent blood flying into the air and raining down on me. He struggled to breathe for a few moments before falling lifelessly on top of me. I pushed him off and ran to the vestibule in the corner. It was locked by a large master lock. A bullet took it right off. I ripped the door open and found it empty. My heart once again sank. I stepped inside frustrated, but instantly felt a hollow floor. I kicked the hay out of the way and saw a trapdoor. I opened it to find my daughter unconscious inside, bound at the hands and feet with a sock in her mouth with a tape around her head. In tears, I picked her up and freed her from the restraints. I brought her outside and began to call 911, only barely recalling that the police knew the man who did this, and were likely friends or family of his. Long story short, my daughter regained consciousness. She sobbed uncontrollably as I held her in my arms. We made the walk back to my car and drove off. We made it to the next town over where I then contacted the police. I told them what had happened, and they took it very seriously. Federal FBI investigators were called immediately and arrived shortly thereafter. I took them to the Biloxi farm, and they tapped everything off as a crime scene. And what I thought was the end, they arrested the waitress at Daisy's and the man who ran the hotel. Turns out they were husband and wife, and the man who kidnapped my daughter was their son. I learned a few months later, after the motel owner turned state witness against his wife, and that the wife and son had a child together, and the girl from the video was their daughter. The police officers that were photographed with these people were also investigated and jailed for various crimes related to their family. Apparently, this was the first time anything of this magnitude had been done by the family. But there was suspected for numerous robberies and attacks in the motel and local police on their way. Underlying the investigation, potentially, the only thing that wasn't found in the scene of the crime was my daughter's portfolio. The only information Katie could give about her captor was that he always wore different masks. When asked if there were multiple captors, she said she only saw one. I suspect she only saw one at a time. He apparently forced her to sit in the garage, which had fashion as an art studio, and make pictures for him all day long, day in and day out, nothing else. Thankfully, there was no evidence of sexual assault or physical abuse. When the man whose name I found out to be Atoll realized I was in the area, he went to the garage, brought her to the barn, tied her up, knocked her out, and put her under the floor in the vestibule. Additionally, the area under the trapdoor was a tunnel, something I hadn't immediately noticed when picking Katie up out of it. These tunnels went under the entirety of the land on the Biloxi farm, and much, much further. It connected to where I had been taken to after being knocked unconscious at Daisy's, in addition to many areas throughout the town. However, the tunnel had been collapsed behind the TVs, and a hatch was broken to. The only more than likely to not give evidence of any advanced tunnel system. I returned home with Katie and my ecstatic wife and son. Our family was finally back together, and the people that did this were either dead or in prison indefinitely. Everything was good, quiet, and uneventful for over a year. Our family got back on track. We got Katie acclimated to normal life again, and got her the professional help needed to get her through her trauma, which was going quite well, at least until last week, when an unmarked envelope showed up at our kitchen table when we got home from a day at the museum. Inside was a picture of my daughter, clearly drawn. This was of a man in a mask, with all kinds of designs on it. I could tell the addition made to this one was a knife in the hand of the man, crudely drawn with a charcoal pencil above the picture. In scratchy writing were the words, "Now you've made me really mad." Holy fuck, that's the end of the story.
Well,
dude.
Shit.
Fuck, that was so good. So it was written, alright, so all the viewers at home, this story was written by Nick Botique and edited by Greg Groshek. I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing those last names wrong. But anyway, hang on, let me scroll all the way back up here. This is a long-ass story. But the name of it is called Daughter's Drawings in Children and Childhood. It's got a rating of 9.29 out of 10. And it was published on November 24th, 2019. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was fucking good.
Yes, definitely was. I could see that being like a movie.
Yeah. It's fucking insane. I love it. I love it so much. It's such a good story.
And also, good thing that there was no one to listen to it.
What?
Good thing that there was no one to listen to it.
Yeah. It fucking sucks.
We're sitting at a group of viewers and 0 comments.
I'm gonna look up if this was true, though. If this actually happened. Even if it didn't, this is still an amazing fucking story.
Back so soon?
It's like, holy fuck. I forgot how good creepypastas are.
Yeah, I know, right? They're such good stories. We're sitting at 1 hour and 26 minutes.
Damn.
Long ass streaming. The viewer count keeps on going 1 and then instantly back to 0.
Yeah, because someone keeps coming in and then leaving. Because they're like, oh, this really good fucking story isn't good enough, apparently. Or they're just really pissed that they came in late.
Should put your notifications on. I'll turn into one of those YouTubers. Make sure to like the video before you watch the video.
Yeah.
Make sure that you like
Jesus.
this video because you definitely love the video before you watch it.
Oh yeah,
that
most
makes
definitely.
sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I mean, watching videos and then liking them is overrated.
Oh yeah, most definitely. You see the little little thing? I'm watching it in real time. It's trippy. Oh, it's about like 10 seconds behind.
Yes, it is.
I don't like that. Is that really what I sound like?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Ouch.
That sound weird as fuck.
Oh, look at this guy. Looks pretty cool.
Oh man. Fried chicken and cornbread, that's southern as fuck right there. I hope it got all my coughs too.
Yeah, it did.
Oh, that's good. Oh, good shit, good shit. Man. It is really late and I have school in the morning, so I have to go, and I hope you enjoyed the story. No one that's watching except for me, myself, and I.
And me.
And you. The one who created the video.
Yes.
Oh man, I'm definitely hooked on creepypasta again. I didn't, like, big when I went through my emo phase. So, like, I was big into it, and, you know, like, Jeff the Killer, which was a piece of shit creepypasta, and Slenderman and all that jazz. And then I just stopped watching it. Like, it just got boring. There were a few good stories that I liked. Like, Remember that movie I told you about, The Window Man, that I wanted to do?
I think so.
You know, about the writer and his brother who go to a cabin, but at the end it turns out he has schizophrenia and none of the things that happened.
I don't think you've told me that.
Oh. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I just spoiled what is an amazing story. Would you like me to tell you my story?
Sure.
And this creature, like, makes a whole bunch of hay barrels circle his house, and it slowly gets closer to his house. All I did was borrow that. Like, other than that, the entire movie's original. So, the movie follows this man and his brother. The man is a writer, a very famous horror writer. And he decides to move to a cabin to write his next book because his fans can't tell the difference between fiction and reality, and so like he's been overwhelmed and people have been trying to fuck with him and all this, and he just doesn't have time to think to write his new book. So he decides to go to this cabin, and for a lot of the movie he faces writer's block. And have you ever seen the movie The Secret Window?
No.
Okay, well, throughout the movie, I give him a, sort of like a, you know how, like, in books, it gives you the character's thoughts in writing, but in a movie you can't really do that?
Yeah.
Well, in this one, in the movie, the main character, you can hear what he's thinking, but it's kind of like there's a second person in his head telling him things. Like you know how, like, you think to yourself and you're like you can contradict yourself in your own head?
Yeah.
That's kind of what it is. So like there's this voiceover that sort of like he interacts with, and obviously no one else can hear it. So he's suffering from extreme writer's block, you know, like he can't think of anything to write, and the voice is like basically the worst side of him. That's like you can't think of fucking anything, no matter what you do, you can't do all this shit. And well, him and his brother at this cabin, we start finding some weird shit. Like there's a pentagram engraved on the wood in the living room, and it's very hard for the main character to sleep. But one night, he can't sleep as usual, and he turns over in his bed, and they live in the upstairs area, and there's this... What the fuck? Someone's tapping on the wall.
Ghost.
Anyway.
Instantly, it's just a ghost. Just
Yeah.
has to be.
Because, you know, those definitely exist, totally. Anyway, so they live in, like, this upper part of the house, and there's this giant window that looks out into the open field of the cabin. And so he turns over, and he can see outside, and the moonlight is coming through the window, and he gets this overwhelming sense of dread and cold. And he gets up and he walks out, and he goes towards the window, and he looks out of the window, and out in the distance, at the very far edge of the field, right where the trees would be, at the very edge of the tree line, is a man. Just the figure of a man standing at the very edge of the woods, staring at him in the cabin. Not doing anything, just standing or staring at him. It's real creepy. And so he calls his brother, and his brother gets up, his brother gets the gun, and his brother goes out into the field, and he's like, I don't see anything. And he's like, I don't know, it could have been in my imagination, all that jazz. So they lock all the doors and stuff, and they head back to sleep. And the next morning, they wake up to find all the hay barrels from the barn lining the tree line in a giant circle around the cabin. Confused by this, they think, oh, it might have been the town boys. They're a whole bunch of teenagers a few miles off. They might have realized that 2 new people moved in. They're just fucking with us. So they pick up the hay barrels and they put them back in the barn, and they continue about their day. Him not being able to think of anything to write, and slowly sipping into alcoholism, and Slight Madness, because him and the voice, they like argue with each other constantly, and like the voice makes him drink a whole bunch. There's a little bit of comedy in the movie. Like, I wanted specifically to have a scene where like he's surrounded by beer bottles, and his brother's like, had a few drinks, have we? And he looks up and he's like, I've only had one, and like he puts up three fingers instead of one, and then the voice goes 15, and then the other guy sits down, and like there's scenes like that out throughout the movie where like he will say something to a character, and then the voice will say what is actually happening if he's lying or not really saying what he means. You know, like a character could be like, what's out there? And he would say, nothing, and the voice would go, there's a man outside. Or like the voice would respond first, and then you would hear his response, you know, shit like that. But anyway, so they go on about their day, and you know, he can't write and all this shit, and he dives more in alcohol, and then a few nights later, the same thing happens. He comes over with an overwhelming sense of dread, and he looks out the window, only to see that the man is now closer. By about 50 yards. He's closer to the house. Alarmed by this, he calls his brother again. His brother goes out with a gun, and this time he's pissed off. He doesn't give a fuck if it's a kid or not. He's just pissed off. So he goes out there yelling and screaming. There's nothing. So he comes back in, he locks all the doors, and he's talking to his brother, and he's like, if you are seeing something, it's probably just some kids. I probably scared them off with what I was doing anyway. So they sleep that night, and then they wake up that morning, and now the circle of hay barrels are back, but this time circling the house at the distance that the man was, the stranger who was standing in the area. So it's about 50 yards closer that the circle is to the cabin. Alarmed by this again, they're like, oh, these fucking kids, huh? And as they're picking up the hay barrels, the main character turns to his brother and he's like, have you noticed that the grass on the other side of the barrels is dead than the ones on the inside? And his brother looks over, and the grass is dead and decayed and much rottier than the side that is inside the hay barrel circle. He's like, I don't know, the kids probably did it with some fucked up fertilizer or something. They're just fucking with us, trying to scare us.
There's always one of those people in the movies.
Oh yeah. So they go back to the house. A few more nights pass of trying to write, and he finally starts writing a little bit. And he starts writing about this man who went mad and killed his wife or something. He starts writing about that, and he searches up about the history of the house and stuff, and he finds out that like the house used to belong to this guy who would eat people alive and shit or whatever, and he's like, oh, it's probably just tall tales, but it's good inspiration, so he starts putting that into his book. And one night, he wakes up, you know, the usual shit, and the dread is almost worse somehow, and he starts to see things more than before. You know, like colors start to shift in the room as he draws towards the window, almost like he's being dragged. It looks out the window, and now the man is 100 yards closer to the house. So at this point, the man is about, I would say, 2 blocks away, maybe, something like that. About a block or 2 away from the house. So they're looking at each other, and he can see a little bit more detail, and he can faintly see the eyes of the man. They're looking directly at him. The man is pitch black. He can't see anything but his eyes. And then his brother gets up, goes out there. This time, he is crazy. He doesn't want to deal with this shit anymore. He's tired of his brother being bothered, and he's tired of him being bothered. So he starts firing off a few warning shots, and he starts screaming at whoever this is. And then, from the window, the main character sees his brother be overtaken by a black shadow that knocks his brother to the ground. So, oh, by the way, the main character's name is October. I should have mentioned that. unique name, right? So, October, he runs out to go get his brother. I think his brother's name was Lennon or something. So October goes to go get Lennon. He runs out there and he picks up his brother and says, what the fuck was that? Well, they don't know. So they sit in the house, not going to sleep. They've locked all the doors, everything, and they sit there and they don't sleep. But they end up falling asleep because, you know, you can't fucking just stay awake an entire day without some extreme shit. They end up falling asleep in the dining room. When they wake up, the hay barrels are back and way closer than before. Right about as distance as the man was standing. And they're like, okay, fuck this, we're moving. So they do the reasonable thing, and they call the moving company. And they get everything packed. They didn't even have that much to begin with. They were only going to be there for a summer while he writes the book. So they pack everything, get everything ready, and they sit there and they wait outside. Now, they've done this in such a quick hurry that they haven't even bothered to pick up the hay barrel circle. But there's a little opening between each barrel that they figure the moving truck can just get through, because they don't even want to touch the barrels anymore. They have no fucking clue what's going on. And they're scared shitless. So they're sitting there on the porch waiting, and the moving truck, you know, they see it coming through the tree line. And they're both sitting there, and they're like, alright, we're finally gonna get the fuck out of here. I'll just finish my book at home. I don't care. We'll just get extra security so these fucking random people don't break into my house. And just as the truck passes through the barrier of hay, a giant black figure wipes over the truck, and the truck flips, and it barrels onto the ground, and it hits part of the dead grass and hay, and it causes this huge dust cloud. Freaking the fuck out. October and Lennon, they bolt to the moving truck to see if the guy's okay. They get over there and they make their way through this dust cloud, and October walks up and he finds the driver's side door, and he finds the driver's head phased through the driver's side door, so that the top of the guy's head is basically of the car, and the other half is on the inside of the door panel. Do you get what I'm saying?
Kind of.
Like, okay, so imagine the door panel as like a canvas, okay? And the guy's head is a piece of fruit. Each half of the fruit is on each side of the canvas. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So his head's stuck like that. Really unnatural shit. And so they freak the fuck out. They freak the fuck out. And they head back inside. And now they're like, okay, this is some supernatural shit. And so they don't sleep that night. And they end up falling, well, October, they decide to take shifts. In October, he falls asleep. And he wakes up, and this dream sequence happens, where he wakes up and he looks out, like all he does is turn towards his window, and there's the man, the window man, standing at his door. Now this is a 2-story house, but the man is up at the window like he's standing there. And finally, he can see detail in his face. And it's just a solid black shadow. All we can see are 2 beady red eyes looking directly at him, and a pure white grin comes across the man's face. And then he sinks. October sinks into the floor. Everything fades. He wakes up, and the voice is gone. We can't hear the voices. There's no input. In fact, October starts to get a bit lonely. And he can't find his brother. His brother is nowhere to be found. He can't find him anywhere. And he looks outside, and the hay barrels are directly up against the house. Like, to each corner of the house. So he's freaking the fuck out. And, you know, like movie stuff, a little bit more stuff happens before this, and everything in between happens a little bit more, but basically, we're at the end of the movie. And, out in the distance, he sees a car. driving up to the driveway. And so he gets on his porch and he starts signaling the car to go the fuck away because he doesn't want another person to get killed. He signals them to go away. But the car stops. And out comes a man and a woman. The woman being his mother, and the other man being a therapist. Both rush over to October, who's freaking out trying to get them to go away. He closes his eyes in horror, and his mother comes up and she greets him and she's like, "Are you okay? Oh my god, I was so worried about you." And October is confused. He's asking all these questions about why they're okay and what happened and didn't he see the truck and where's his brother and all this other shit. And it's revealed that October suffers from severe schizophrenia. His brother doesn't exist. He was never a writer. And he broke out of a mental institution after watching a movie about a writer and drove to a cabin, made up all this shit, everything he's seen, the window man, the car being flipped, his brother, the voice, all inside of his head. All the dream sequence was all fitness of his imagination. And then the movie ends.
Good to see you again, partner.
What do you think?
I like it. I like it a lot.
And we're gonna do it in GTA.
Yes.
No, better yet, Red Dead. In Red Dead, we're gonna put a car and a computer and all that shit. But yeah, no, dude, that we could definitely only do that in live action. But I would really love it if that when we finally do Adam Films, that'd be one of our movies. Cause that, oh my god, it's called The Window Man, and yeah, no. That and The Woods are probably the only two horror movies I'll ever make. I'm not, like, I love horror movies, but I don't really write them. I do like thrillers, though. And serial killers, I can write in a thriller. Like that one movie I told you about, Lakeshore Drive. Fuck yeah. I did tell you about Lakeshore Drive, right?
Yeah, I think so.
You know, the story that's basically the prequel to The Woods. About the serial killer who listens to classical music. And I told you he was going to have that big scene where it's set to that one classical cue from V for Vendetta, where he goes across this hallway lined with people and he slits all their throats as he walks along and dances to the music.
No, I don't think you did tell me about that.
Well, I'll tell you about it another time because it's a really long fucking story. Either way.
Either way.
I'm glad to be a part of this broadcast and to have told two great stories to you. One of being top-notch and the other being decent. Talking about my story, of course, being decent. The other one was fucking fantastic. I mean, holy shit. Daughter's drawings, that shit was amazing. But anyway, I'm gonna go and kill myself because I'm dying.
I'm dying as well.
Yes, we are. But
we are dying.
thank you, no
children.
one that is watching, for this hour and a half.
Yeah.
I bid you
1 hour and 48 minutes, almost 2 hours.
almost 2-hour broadcast with pure nonsense. But I'm gonna see you tomorrow, man. I am fucking tired, but that was pretty dope. I liked telling stories. So, see ya.
Yeah. See you later.
Boy.
Okay. Jesus Christ.